Tonight, the massive manhunt for the fiancé of Gabby Petito. Multiple agencies now searching a 25,000-acre nature reserve in Florida for Brian Laundrie, the only person of interest in her homicide. Underwater dive teams on scene, our team in Florida with the latest on the investigation. Breaking news, the FDA has authorized booster shots of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine shot for those 65 and older and high-risk Americans. How soon could they be available? Bus stop horror. 3 kids shot on their way to school, at least 1 killed. The search now for the gunman. Trump's $100 million lawsuit. The former president suing his own niece and the New York Times over a bombshell report on his taxes. But does he have a case? Hallie Jackson reporting in. Blocking the border, the governor of Texas setting up a blockade of cars to deter Haitian migrants from crossing into the U.S. The incredible surge. Authorities confirming they have stopped more than 1 million migrants this year alone. And the new images tonight, Haitians upset over their deportation, clashing with officers as they tried to rush back onto a plane that had just landed in Port-au-Prince. And the emotional testimony in the trial of former Theranos CEO Elizabeth Holmes. One woman saying the company's blood test, touted as a breakthrough technology, mistakenly told her she lost her baby. Top story starts right now. And good evening, I'm Tom Llamas. Our top story tonight, the intense manhunt for Brian Laundrie, the only person of interest in the death of Gabby Petito. Dive teams called into a Florida nature reserve today as multiple agencies, including the FBI, combed through the 25,000-acre park. Authorities shifting through waist-deep waters infested with both alligators and snakes. Laundrie's parents telling police they last saw their son more than a week ago heading out for a hike in that same reserve. Petito's death now ruled a homicide after a coroner identified remains found in a Wyoming park as hers. The exact cause of death, though, has not been released. Laundrie believed to be the last person to see Gabby alive. The two setting off on a cross-country road trip from Florida back in July, but Gabby's parents reporting her missing earlier this month after not hearing from their daughter for 2 weeks. And tonight, another witness coming forward about an argument between the couple while on the road. Katie Beck leads us off tonight from Southwest Florida.
Tonight, the search at the swamp continues. A massive manhunt for Brian Laundrie, now a person of interest in the homicide investigation of his fiancée, Gabby Petito.
We are trying to cover every acre in this preserve.
All 25,000 of them, the vast area now a grid search by all-terrain vehicles, canines, and dive teams. So far, no sign of Laundrie, who headed there more than a week ago with a backpack, according to his parents.
You can't keep chocolate in Utah.
Petito and Laundrie had been documenting their cross-country trip since early August. Laundrie returned to Florida without Petito September 1st, her family reporting her missing 10 days later.
What's going on? How come you're crying?
Newly released police reports shedding more light on the couple's dispute while on the road.
We drove by and the gentleman was slapping the girl.
A witness statement from a second person who saw the altercation, telling police something seemed off. Officers stopped and questioned the couple, but no charges were filed. Karen Aberts lives across the street from the Laundrie's Florida home and recalls watching the couple as they outfitted their van for the trip.
It seemed like, your normal young couple just kind of hanging out.
Aber says Laundrie would routinely go on walks with his parents, sometimes with Gabby, too, who previously lived with them.
Are you surprised that they didn't contact authorities sooner about Brian being missing?
I can't imagine my kid saying that I'm going for a hike, and then 2 days later he's still not home. So to me, I would have been on the phone within hours after him not coming home.
Tonight, with Laundrie still missing, Petito's family no closer to the answers they so desperately seek.
All right, Katie Beck joins us now live. She's been following this story very closely for us here on Top Story. Katie, you mentioned there in your report that the parents were taking those walks at night, Laundrie's parents, and now some are questioning their actions in recent days.
That's right. The neighbor we spoke to, Tom, she said she was really sort of suspicious after this happened as to why they didn't go to police sooner. She said the family looked as though they were close. She was seeing them engage on these nightly walks, and everything to them appeared normal. So now they're wondering how well they actually knew those neighbors and if, in fact, those neighbors knew more than they're telling police about where their son is. Tom?
All right, Katie Beck leading us off tonight here on Top Story. Katie, thank you. For more insight on that active FBI investigation, let's bring in a former FBI agent, Dr. Brianna Fox. She's now a professor of criminology at the University of Florida. Dr. Fox, let's go over this timeline. So Gabby was reported missing on September 11th. Laundrie returns home September 1st and was allegedly last seen by his parents on the 14th. Are investigators now behind the eight ball here?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, they are. Unfortunately, if we had more information sooner, that's the best way to be able to track somebody, know exactly where they're going, be hot on the case. And unfortunately, now we're behind.
You know, you just heard that conversation we had with Katie there about the parents. Does their story add up so far?
It seems to be missing some pieces, and I agree entirely with the neighbor. If that was my child that was missing for days or at least gone without any notes or calls, I would certainly be willing to call the police a lot sooner. So it does seem like there's some pieces here that are still not falling into place.
Dr. Brianna Fox, we thank you for your analysis. And we have breaking news into Top Story tonight. Booster Decision Day. The FDA just authorizing booster shots for Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine. But not every American will be eligible for the extra protection. NBC's Stephanie Gosk reports.
All eyes on the FDA tonight, on the cusp of deciding who can get the Pfizer booster and who can't. Last week, an FDA panel recommended people over the age of 65 and those at high risk should be eligible. Today, the CDC met to discuss who should be considered high risk. Now it's in the FDA's hands to make the final decision, which will only apply to those who received the Pfizer vaccine, not those who got Moderna and Johnson & Johnson.
This is not the situation where we want to be, where people are eligible or not eligible based on which vaccine they got. I think it'd be really helpful for the FDA and the CDC to come out with broader guidance across a range of vaccines.
Keith Albert is anxious to get his booster. He got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine earlier this year.
I'm a little bit frustrated. I would get the J&J. They would come out with it. But it doesn't look too promising just yet.
But others aren't waiting. An unknown number have already gotten unauthorized boosters with little oversight to stop them. Dr. Peter Grinspoon, an internist at Mass General, says he's been bombarded by patients who want an extra dose.
It does put physicians in an awkward situation because people do come to us and sort of say they're desperate, they're scared, and they want to get a booster. And who do they call? They call their physician friend and say, how can I sort of game the system?
Meantime, international pressure has been growing on the U.S. not to widely distribute booster shots when much of the world still waits for first doses. During a virtual COVID summit today, President Biden announced the U.S. will buy 500 million Pfizer vaccines and donate them to low-income countries, calling the pandemic an all-hands-on-deck global situation.
We also know that to beat the pandemic here, we need to beat it everywhere.
All right, a lot of COVID headlines coming in tonight. So we have Stephanie Gosk in studio and NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar as well joining us live on set. Guys, thanks for being here tonight. So, Steph, I want to start with you. You could sort of hear the frustration in that doctor's voice, those patients who want to get the booster. They don't qualify. Rules are rules.
Right. Rules are rules. The only people authorized to get the booster right now are people who have immune systems that are compromised. Otherwise, no one else is authorized to do it. But you've got people that are, as he says, desperate, and no one is overseeing who's getting these vaccines. The truth is, it's pretty easy to get them.
Dr. Azar, what are you telling patients who are asking, hey, can I get the boosters? Can you do me a solid when they don't qualify? And how patient do they have to be?
Well, you know what? I feel it's a little bit maybe not fair for me to answer this because I am a rheumatologist, so the vast majority of our patients are actually immunocompromised and do fall into that category. But, you know, I really like to stick to the rules when it comes to something like this, and I want my decisions and my recommendations to my patients to be evidence-based. And I take the extra time to actually explain to patients that in spite of some of the medications that they're on, they're not necessarily immunocompromised, and that they may not need the booster right now, and that it might actually be better off for them to wait. And I spend that time talking to patients, and once you do and you kind of explain, it kind of like takes away a little bit of that urgency and that sense of out of, you know, that the patients feel out of control, and that they're knowing that their doctor and provider is trying to do the best thing for them, you know, that is science-based.
Yeah, people are so nervous because of the Delta variant. And Steph, I know you have another update for us. We may be coming down from the latest peak.
Yeah, this is really great news, actually. NBC News data shows that this latest spike, which you know was fueled by the Delta variant, variant may actually be over, that we may have peaked last week. 7 of the last 8 days, cases have gone down. That's the longest sustained decrease in cases in 3 months, Tom.
Okay, that's a positive trend, but Dr. Azar, what can we tell our viewers going into the fall and then the winter?
Experts are always concerned about the fall and the winter. For what reason? We're moving indoors, the air is cooler, the air is drier, and that is just a very hospitable environment for the virus. And I have to also make a plug for flu shots. They are available. I actually got mine today. I completely forgot. I did not have much of a reaction. You know, we are concerned about a surge in flu cases this year because we did not have a lot of flu last year, so we don't have any immunity that's holding over from that. So, you know, everyone, buckle your seat belts. If you're a candidate for a booster, you will get one. If you've been vaccinated with any one of the 3 that are authorized in the country right now, you are still very well protected against severe disease, hospitalization, and death.
Okay, Dr. Azar, Stephanie Goss, thanks so much for being here today. We really do appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, we're going to also follow some developing news that we've been seeing all day out of Louisville, Kentucky. The hunt is on for a gunman who opened fire at a bus stop, killing a teenager and injuring 2 others while they were on their way to school. You know, across the country, gun violence against children is on the rise. Gabe Gutierrez has the latest.
Tonight, police in Louisville, Kentucky are searching for this vehicle after a drive-by gunman shot 3 teens at a bus stop. One of them, a 16-year-old, died.
I knew that my nephew had his whole life ahead of him, and he was destined for greatness.
The city's police chief outraged.
Well, we can't sit here with our thumbs up our ass, do nothing different, and think we won't be back at this podium.
In Chicago yesterday, 3 kids were among 15 people shot. In D.C., 5 people hit, including a 13-year-old.
When someone brazenly fires into a crowd of people, striking 5 people, innocent people in this instance, that's unacceptable.
Across the country, more children and teens are being caught in the crossfire. Gunshot injuries at pediatric trauma centers are up in Fort Worth, Memphis, and Hartford, Connecticut.
We have never seen this much of an increase over an extended period of time.
Last year, more than 5,100 kids were shot nationwide. At least 1,300 of them died. This year, firearm deaths are up 13% overall, and more children and teens have been shot than at the same time last year.
Why do you think that is?
There's been a surge in gun sales. We saw with the pandemic, we've seen that. The pandemic, we saw people released from prison. The courts have been closed. I think all of these things together are contributing to the number of children we're seeing who are injured by guns.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez joins us live now. Now, Gabe, going back to that shooting at the bus stop you mentioned at the top of your report in Louisville, the family of the teenager who died today believes he was caught in the crossfire?
Yeah, Tom, they say that he was not the intended target, but so far police have not identified a suspect. They hope that the surveillance image of that Jeep with Illinois plates might provide some clues. Tom?
Gabe Gutierrez for us tonight. Gabe, thank you for that. Let's get to politics. Former President Donald Trump filing a lawsuit against a member of his own family and the New York Times, accusing his estranged niece of taking part in a, quote, insidious plot to obtain his tax records and hand them over to the Times. NBC senior Washington correspondent Hallie Jackson reports.
$100 million family feud tonight. Trump versus Trump, with the former president in a new lawsuit accusing his niece, Mary Trump, the New York Times, and 3 of its reporters of an insidious plot to get his tax records. Mary Trump now clapping back, describing her uncle as a loser, acting out of desperation. The lawsuit alleges reporters from the Times convinced Mary Trump to smuggle records out of her attorney's office and that she broke her confidentiality agreement by sharing those documents. The records became the foundation of a Pulitzer Prize-winning series published by the Times in 2018, detailing what the paper called a history of tax schemes and fraud by the former president and his company. The Times defending its reporting, calling the lawsuit an attempt to silence independent news organizations. One of the reporters sued by Trump, tweeting, "I knocked on Mary Trump's door. She opened it. I think they call that journalism." Mr. Trump has never released his tax records himself, breaking longtime precedent.
Every president since the 70s has had a required audit from the IRS. The last 6 have released him. But as president, sir, is
you know, the only one that cares about my tax returns are the reporters. Okay?
You don't think the American public is concerned about that?
No, I don't think so. I won.
For her part, Mary Trump talked about her collaboration with the Times in her book out last year, saying then she was ready to accept any consequences.
I know my family to be quite vindictive, and Donald has a rather passionate following. But all of that aside, I needed to do this. I felt it was my responsibility.
The former president repeatedly distancing himself from his niece.
She was not exactly a family favorite. We didn't have a lot of respect or like for her. I would have never said that, except she writes a book that's so stupid and so vicious, and it's a lie.
The former president there talking about his niece. Hallie Jackson joins us now from Washington. And Hallie, you know, we both covered the first Trump campaign, and before he was even in politics, Donald Trump used this tactic before, filing lawsuits to get what he wanted. How much of this do you think is about revenge, i.e. getting some money and damages? And how much of this do you think is about intimidation so it doesn't happen again?
It's such a good question, Tom, and I think, you know, truly probably only Donald Trump can answer that one, right? But here's the thing. You make such a good point. He is litigious, right? That's an objective fact. We know that about Donald Trump, and this is part of that pattern. He has sued news organizations in the past, largely for stories that he felt were unflattering to him. And even before that, you had that analysis on the campaign you and I covered in 2016 that before he ran for president, 3,500 plus lawsuits were filed by him or his business, right? So this idea of lawsuits from Donald Trump is not unusual. Here's what I'm watching for, Tom, and here's what's particularly interesting about this suit. If it moves forward, right, if it goes to the next phase and the next one after that, it is very possible that Donald Trump will, for example, have to be deposed. And under discovery, there is a risk that Mr. Trump faces that information that he doesn't want to get out there, right, ends up getting revealed. So that is the line. That is the balance that's going to have to happen on this one moving forward, Tom.
Hallie Jackson for us tonight. Hallie, thank you for that. As we wait to see if President Trump will have his day in court, we want to take a closer look at the allegations in this suit. Let's bring in Barbara McQuaid. She's a former federal prosecutor and a professor at the University of Michigan Law School. So, Barbara, as Hallie just mentioned right there, former President Trump, he's going after his niece and the New York Times. His team has accused both parties of, quote, an insidious plot to get his tax returns. But does he stand on any legal ground here, and how hard will this be to prove in court?
Well, it's interesting, Tom. This is not a defamation lawsuit. And so he is not denying the truth of any of what has been reported about his financial records. What he says instead is Mary Trump promised not to disclose anything relating to the litigation involving his deceased father's estate way back, and that by sharing this information with the New York Times, she breached that contract. And so he is going after her for breach of contract. What's interesting here will be what does the language of that contract say? The complaint says it protected the litigation. She has produced the underlying documents. So there will have to be some interpretation of that contract. The New York Times is alleged to have tortiously interfered with that contract by urging her to produce the documents. But again, you'd have to show that the contract covers this behavior, but also that the New York Times knew about the contract and intentionally tried to get her to breach it. So that's another question that'll be before the court. And I think with regard to both of them, one of the elements a plaintiff has to prove is damages, that their reputation suffered as a result of this. I think Donald Trump might be that unique plaintiff who is incapable of suffering damages. Those who love him don't care what happens. He could kill somebody in New York, shoot someone in Times Square, and their opinion of him wouldn't change. And for his critics, there isn't anything worse you can tell me about Donald Trump that would make me think any worse of him. And so it may be that he is incapable of being able to demonstrate damages. But as Hallie said, I think the litigation poses some risk of discovery. So it'll be interesting to watch this one.
On that point, briefly, if there were to be depositions, I mean, those would have to happen unless they settled beforehand, correct?
Absolutely. And I think in a case like this where damages are an issue in the case, even if you can prove that this contract was breached, you're going to have to show what did it do to his ability to generate income. And I think to figure that out, you need to look at a full accounting of his financial picture, including his tax returns. And so I think this one might be more about some bluster and getting some headlines and the ability to complain that he can't get a fair shake when it comes to the press than it is about getting his day in court.
Barbara McQuaid, we thank you for your analysis. We want to head now to the southern border. Thousands of Haitians are still sheltering under that Texas bridge, and there could be thousands more on the way. Authorities revealing they have already stopped more than 1 million migrants at the border this year. NBC's Morgan Chesky is in Del Rio, Texas tonight.
Tonight on the Texas border, these are the faces of those who don't know what tomorrow holds. Our crew given rare access to the camp, more than 5,000 Haitian migrants still call home.
And this has been the closest we've been allowed to get to this camp. And as we look this direction, it is hard to believe
Some of these men, women, and children have now been beneath this very bridge for more than a week, trying to create whatever shelter they can to stay cool. Everyone's future here, incredibly uncertain. Just 2 days ago, Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas with this public warning to migrants.
If you come to the United States illegally, you will be returned.
DHS officials tonight telling NBC News thousands of migrants who were under that bridge have been released into the United States. Many given notices to appear at an immigration center within 60 days to get a court date for an asylum hearing. Just yesterday, Mayorkas was pressed for specifics on the surge.
How many people have been returned? How many people are being detained? How many people have been dispersed to all points around America?
Senator, I would be pleased to provide you with that data.
I want them now. Why don't you have that information now?
Senator, I do not have that data.
Why not?
Back on the border, for those who have made it to Del Rio, Texas, those images of agents on horseback chasing children and adults alike are still fresh in their minds. John, who hides his face out of fear, telling Telemundo he was amongst that crowd. Law enforcement doubling down. So this is where pretty much everyone came across.
Right.
The dam where thousands crossed, now empty, with Texas State Trooper cars lining the riverbanks. DPS tells us up to 600 Haitian migrants are now making their way towards Del Rio. But it's the other areas that have them worried.
The biggest concern right now is that we still have gaps along the border. We have individuals that we don't know who they are, where they're coming from, but they're crossing into our country.
Okay, Morgan Chesky joins us again from the border tonight there in Del Rio, Texas. Morgan, I want to turn to some other news that we're following. Haitians deported from the U.S. on Tuesday, assaulting the pilots on board one of those flights when it arrived in Port-au-Prince, and the images are out tonight.
Yeah, Tom, they are, and this was confirmed through DHS documents. And this happened after one of those deportation flights of several coming from Texas straight to Port-au-Prince landed. We're told a group of Haitian men made their way off one of those flights on board another plane where they assaulted 3 ICE agents in addition to multiple pilots on board that plane. Now, fortunately, none of those injuries are life-threatening, but this underscores the tension that's only rising here as these deportations go up. Tom?
Morgan Chesky with that new reporting tonight. Morgan, thank you. Next to the drama unfolding in the Spanish Canary Islands. A volcano erupting for days. Lava now threatening more neighborhoods on the island of La Palma. We have a reporter there tonight. Sky News correspondent Ashana Haranag is there.
Straight from the core of the earth, it roars, pulsing and powerful. It's a spectacle not seen in half a century. They can't help but watch. But this old foe has consumed swathes of the island of Las Palmas. It's divided villages with putrid lava and swept away homes. Miguel remembers the last eruption 50 years ago, but says nothing compares to this.
It is not comparable to this one. This one has done a lot of damage. The other one didn't destroy anything. Nothing. This one is a disaster. A disaster.
Even picture-perfect views are being eaten away. Days after its eruption, Cumbre Vieja continues to bubble and spit molten lava into the night sky. That unmistakable orange glow consuming this town. It could be like this for weeks. And it could get worse, with threats of lava flows, toxic gases and acid rain, as if this town hadn't been through enough. And as I speak to you tonight, we are being covered in volcanic ash. This is like the molten tap no one can turn off. Ashna Haranag, Sky News for NBC News in La Palma. Back to you, Tom.
Ashana, we thank you for that report. When we come back, Elizabeth Holmes on trial. Once a Silicon Valley superstar, now she's accused of defrauding investors about a blood test that did not work. A former patient taking the stand, saying the test incorrectly told her she had a miscarriage. Plus, tragedy on the gridiron. The 14-year-old dying from a football injury, reigniting the debate about the game's safety. And the massive warehouse fire, why it took firefighters 2 days to put it out. You're watching Top Story. We're just getting started. Next on Top Story, inside the high-stakes fraud trial of former Theranos CEO Elizabeth Holmes. Heartbreaking new testimony from a patient that used the now shuttered company's blood test. The results incorrectly telling her she lost her baby. Jake Ward reports.
Tonight, disgraced Theranos executive Elizabeth Holmes under the microscope.
First they think you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the world.
Facing emotional testimony in her fraud trial. Holmes and her former lover and co-defendant Ramesh Balwani created a high-profile, high-tech blood testing company valued at more than $9 billion. But it all collapsed after researchers and regulators discovered the technology did not work.
I feel devastated that we did not catch and fix these issues faster.
What do you hold yourself responsible for?
I'm the founder and CEO of this company. Anything that happens in this company is my responsibility at the end of the day.
Brittany Gould, the first of 11 patients to testify, described hearing her nurse practitioner deliver devastating Theranos test results about her unborn baby. She told me, "Your numbers are falling, unfortunately, and that I was miscarrying," a visibly emotional Gould said. Another company's test later showed everything was fine, and she delivered a healthy baby. The question before the jury now is whether she and Balwani believed in their technology or committed fraud by hyping something they knew didn't work.
It's our actions that our little girls will see when they start to think about who do they want to be when they grow up.
Defense attorneys for Holmes argue that the company tried hard to disrupt the blood test industry, just as countless companies have disrupted other industries, and that it was all in good faith.
This says the lab test reinvented. In short, that's what you're doing.
That's the dream.
Failure is not a crime, defense attorney Lance Wade said in his opening statement. Trying your hardest and coming up short is not a crime. Holmes and Balwani are charged with a dozen felony counts and face the possibility of as many as 20 years behind bars if convicted.
All right, Jake Ward joins us now live here on Top Story. Jake, talk to me about these unsealed court documents and what they tell us about the defense's strategy.
Well, those documents suggest, Tom, that Holmes may in fact call experts to testify that she was a victim of psychological, sexual, and physical abuse at the hands of Balwani, her co-defendant and ex-boyfriend. She says that was the horror she was subjected to, and it is presumed that the defense will then say that affected her state of mind and changed in some way her intent when it came to the possibility of fraud. Balwani, meanwhile, denies those charges, and his trial begins in January of next year, Tom.
All right, Jake Ward reporting in for us tonight. Jake, we appreciate that. Still ahead on Top Story, the major health update for the Reverend Jesse Jackson and his stern message for the unvaccinated. And it's that time of year again, retailers already gearing up for the holiday shopping season. Stephanie Rule in the house on Top Story tonight. She explains why some small businesses are now, get this, hoarding this year's must-have gifts. That's all coming up. You're watching Top Story. Back now with Top Story's news feed, a roundup of what's making headlines across the country. Bipartisan police reform talks have ended with no deal. Senator Cory Booker announcing negotiations on a sweeping policing bill spurred by the death of George Floyd have broken down, adding Democrats will now explore other options. In a statement, Republican Senator Tim Scott blamed Democrats for walking away from negotiations. President Biden saying he will continue to work with members of Congress on police reform. All right, a grim milestone in Oakland, California. The city now recording its 100th homicide this year. The police chief calling it a crisis after opening a press conference with 100 seconds of silence in honor of the victims there in Oakland. Just one of several U.S. cities seeing an uptick in homicides since the pandemic began. An investigation tonight into the cause of a massive warehouse fire in Arkansas. Take a look at this video. Firefighters in Little Rock battling the recycling plant fire for a second day in a row. Highly flammable materials fueling the blaze with tractors and propane tanks, causing a series of explosions. Plumes of black seen for miles, even detectable on weather radars. A neighboring Budweiser factory was saved. So far, no injuries reported. Reverend Jesse Jackson is back home tonight after he was hospitalized with COVID-19. The civil rights icon released from a physical rehab center today after he was admitted to the hospital more than a month ago while battling the virus and Parkinson's. Jackson today telling reporters he is now urging people to get vaccinated for survival. And McDonald's is phasing out plastic toys from their Happy Meals. The fast food giant has already started rolling out some sustainable toys with hopes to eliminate fossil fuel-based plastic in Happy Meals worldwide by 2025. The company reportedly testing out 3D paper-based items. All right, turning now to Money Talks, what consumers and investors need to know from the business world and beyond. Supply chain issues fueled by the pandemic will make those popular holiday gifts hard to find. And now small businesses are trying to keep up with big box stores and hoarding toys ahead of holiday shopping season. NBC's Stephanie Rule explains.
Catherine Nguyen owns 3 toy stores in Chicago.
We are celebrating 25 years next month.
But this year, she's facing shortages like never before. Supply chain backlogs are making it hard to get products on the shelves. And with the holidays coming up, there is no time to waste.
And I'm begging, emailing, texting the vendors, doing whatever it is I can cajole them to ship me product.
Are you now hoarding product in anticipation of shipping delays?
Absolutely, I am.
Major retailers are facing backlogs too, but to avoid extra delays in items made in other countries like China, Target, Walmart, IKEA, and Home Depot are chartering their own private cargo vessels and ordering larger quantities of items they know will be in demand.
So retailers are chartering their vessel to invest in their consumer. Consumers are expecting that products are there come holiday season.
But as these chartered container ships set sail, ports in places like Los Angeles and Long Beach are becoming increasingly congested, with wait times lasting over a week.
So if they're chartering their own vessels, it's going to hurt the backlog. Right now, there's only so many container terminals that can offload vessels, and it's very much a pay-to-play.
Which makes it hard for small business owners like Catherine, who knows she'll be having tough conversations about out-of-stock items with customers this season.
I've never put out a holiday catalog that I wasn't certain that I would have 100% of the items in the catalog. And this year, 15 or 20% of those products in there, we won't even ever see.
Her advice?
You really like it, really think that your kid's going to want it, get it.
All right, Stephanie joins us now live on set. So in order for these retailers to get what they want, they're going to have to pay more. So that means we're going to have to pay more.
Well, they're certainly paying more. Those big retailers right now can pay up to 10 times what you would regularly pay, what they would pay to get their products here. Yet even still, they're struggling. So for small businesses, they really don't have a shot. So when you think about the consumer, you and me, if low prices and fast shipping are your #1 priority, well, I can promise you, Tom, this is not going to be your year. But if you're somebody who says shopping local is important to me, this is your year to do it. But what I really want people to pay attention to is when you make your holiday budget, be aware of this. Because prices are likely to be up. And I'm not saying, oh, throw in another $100. You might not have that. So just budget for it. Know that you could be paying 10% more, and get ready now.
No, it's smart. Give yourself a reality check. You always have the best advice for our viewers. What's one tip then for this holiday shopping season to not try to beat it, but at least try to get what you want and save money?
I'm not trying to be cute. I know we say it every year, shop early. Shop early this year for real. 50 million Americans are expected to be shopping this month. And if you're looking for a particular item, I'm talking about our kids, this one item, get it now. Don't try to game this system. And feel free, I know you feel weird, ask a store manager, say, what day do you get your shipments? And you might want to try the store that day.
Okay, what are you getting me?
No. It's called my presents.
There you go.
My presents.
That's right.
Live
on Top Story. Okay, Steph, thank you so much for that. We always do appreciate it. All right, just in tonight, sources telling NBC News the FDA says it will grant emergency use authorization of the Pfizer COVID-19 booster for Americans 65 and older and higher risk Americans. It comes as questions are swirling over those breakthrough COVID infections for the fully vaccinated. Is there a cause for concern as the Delta variant races across the country? NBC's Tom Costello reports.
Hey guys, I'm out of the hospital. I was in there for 3 days. COVID hit me really hard.
With celebrities, athletes, and politicians sharing their stories of contracting COVID even after being fully vaccinated, it may seem like so-called breakthrough cases are becoming the norm. While it is a small but growing number, many experts say the term breakthrough incorrectly implies that the vaccines don't work.
There is no vaccine in the world that completely protects you from every infection.
Importantly, what they are supposed to do is to protect us against severe disease.
So just how many COVID cases are there among the fully vaccinated? Tracking can be difficult, partly because the CDC no longer tracks many asymptomatic and mild cases. But the agency does monitor hospitalizations and deaths from so-called breakthroughs, which indicate just how rare terrible outcomes really are. As of last week, the CDC says just over 10,000 required hospitalization, with slightly more than 2,500 deaths among fully vaccinated symptomatic COVID patients. That's a tiny fraction, though, compared to the more than 180 million Americans who are fully vaccinated, and more than 675,000 overall COVID deaths just in the U.S. Still, catching the coronavirus can be concerning for anyone. Kathleen Hipps received 2 shots of Moderna's vaccine last spring, then contracted COVID in July.
I really didn't think I was that sick. It just kind of felt like a typical cold. And then it just kept deteriorating.
Despite getting sick and having some lingering symptoms, Kathleen is still grateful her bout with COVID wasn't worse.
I have 2 little boys. I can't imagine them growing up without a mother. I can't imagine how much worse it would have been for me if I had not had the vaccine.
Some experts are warning we could see more breakthrough cases in the coming months, partly because vaccine immunity is waning for some, also due to the ongoing spread of the Delta variant, especially among the unvaccinated. It's also why vaccine makers are pointing to data that they say shows booster shots could be a helpful tool in preventing more cases in the fall. But other scientists argue that while protection against mild disease may somewhat decrease over time, the vaccine effectiveness at preventing severe disease or death endures.
These vaccines are amazingly protective against getting severe disease, landing in the hospital, and dying from COVID.
One other note here, and that is concern about whether if you do get one of these breakthrough cases, you may be at risk for developing long-haul cases of COVID where you're sick for months on end. But a new study in the British medical journal The Lancet finds fully vaccinated people with these rare breakthrough cases are 50% less likely to get long-haul symptoms than the unvaccinated. And long haul, as we've reported many times, can be debilitating. Lung and heart issues, brain fog, but again, far less likely in the fully vaccinated who contract these rare breakthrough cases.
A piece of positive news there, Tom. Thanks so much. Time for our America segment. What's making news across Central and South America? Mexico has filed a lawsuit against its ex-security chief, allegedly linked to the Sinaloa drug cartel. The suit filed in Miami aiming to recover illegally obtained assets from Genaro Garcia Luna, the former security minister, is charged with using his time in the government to ensure the safe passage of drugs and share key information to the cartel, which was once led by El Chapo. He has pleaded not guilty. And Brazil's health minister has tested positive for COVID-19 while attending the UN General Assembly here in New York. Marcelo Quiroga testing positive just 24 hours after meeting UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson and other British officials. He is now the second member of the Brazilian delegation to test positive while in New York and will have to quarantine here for 14 days. Turning now to Europe and the apparent assassination attempt on a top aide to Ukraine's president. Authorities saying rounds of automatic gunfire, you can see the bullet holes there, hit a car carrying the senior officials. The aide walked away unharmed, but the driver was injured. Investigators looking into if the shooting was intended for the country's president, who happened to be in New York for the UN General Assembly. The president saying he does not know who is responsible. This week, NBC News is covering the range of extremes when it comes to our climate. Tonight, we take you to Scotland and its many iconic castles. While they have survived countless attacks throughout history, now they face a new enemy, climate change. Here's NBC's Keir Simmons.
Scotland, known for its rolling hills, picturesque valleys and rainy days. But as our climate changes, so does the weather. Towering above the country's capital, the iconic Edinburgh Castle, one of hundreds of Scotland's historic sites, feeling the effects. I met with David Harkin, a climate scientist working to protect these places.
Good to meet you. Predictably, it's raining.
I mean, classic Scotland, really. Yeah, welcome.
Great view, though.
Unbeatable, I'd say.
With a history dating back almost 3,000 years, it's a site worth saving.
So this is Castle Rock. Doesn't get much more historic than this.
No, absolutely. I mean, you're actually almost certainly standing in one of the longest continuously inhabited places in the UK.
Amongst the stones, stories of royalty, war and sieges.
People tried to attack this castle again and again.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Various points throughout its history.
You always know places are old when the spaces between buildings are tiny.
With some traditions still kept alive today.
I'll be able to hear again soon.
But now the castle is on the front line of a different kind of battle. Last July, an extreme rainstorm turned a 17th century courtyard into a waterfall.
It was like living through the graphs and stats that I see every day and documents and reports and journals, etc., but in real life. So a real wake-up call.
The weather can quite literally shut this place down, much like the old battles and the old sieges used to do.
This castle has fought against adversary after adversary.
That's right.
Has it ever faced anything like climate change?
Today, in the 21st century, climate change, I would say, is arguably the greatest threat that the castle faces. Threat is maybe not even the right word, because I would describe climate change as being a sort of present risk. You know, it's here now, and we're already seeing the impacts of it.
For scientists like David, the writing is on the wall.
So you've had what's called delamination. A thin surface layer sort of has fallen off. This is supposed to happen in a way.
But not fast.
But not as fast as climate change will make it happen.
It's not just Edinburgh Castle. A quarter of Scotland's buildings are historic. Its many Neolithic sites, abbeys and ruins threatened by sea level rises and storms. To preserve the past, conservationists draw on techniques both old and new, tracking decay using digital mapping techniques and maintaining sites with constant repairs.
With all this heritage to protect, perhaps it's not surprising that Scotland is a world leader in climate change mitigation. By 2045, the Scots aim to reduce net greenhouse gases to zero.
And in a rare glimpse from the castle roof, beauty and vulnerability on full display.
You stand here and you realise how exposed this castle truly is to all of the elements.
That's right, yeah. I mean, the castle and its different structures and components will be really exposed and vulnerable to, you know, every passing storm. We already know that Scotland's about 1 degree warmer. We know that our wettest days are getting wetter. We know that our hottest days are getting hotter.
Scotland, with its rich history, now working to protect its future.
All right, Keir Simmons joins us now from London. And Keir, this is something that not just Scotland is dealing with, but countries all over the world, including the U.S., with their own monuments. And that castle we were talking about there in your report, 400 years old, but they're using a cutting-edge type of technology to find that water damage?
That's exactly right, Tom. They're using thermal imaging cameras and microwave moisture monitors to look inside these ancient walls and figure out exactly where water is getting in and causing damage. And then, I guess more simply, just upgrading drainage systems so that when there is a big downpour of water, sometimes unprecedented, the castle is able to deal with it.
But Keir, there is a reality here because there are a lot of beautiful castles and forts in that kingdom of yours, but not all of them can be saved, correct?
Yeah, you know, that's absolutely right. And, you know, our castles here, our ancient monuments are part of our historic memory. They're part of our culture. It really just brings home what we could be losing because of climate change, Tom.
All right, Keir Simmons for us tonight. Keir, thank you for that. Back here in the States, coming up, the high school football tragedy, a 14-year-old dying after he suffered a head injury during a game. How experts say schools and coaches can try and protect players. Stay with us. Back now with that high school football tragedy, a teenager dying after sustaining a head injury during a game. One of several similar incidents this year, and it's all adding to the debate over kids playing that sport. NBC News Now correspondent Priscilla Thompson has the story.
Tonight, teenage deaths fueling more debate over the safety of kids playing football. Tyler Chrisman kicked off his freshman year with hopes of scoring touchdowns on the football field. But that field now holds a far more tragic memory. His dad writing on Facebook Tuesday, "We always knew you were meant to stand out. This is not the way we envisioned it, but this is what we have been dealt. Chrisman died this week. He suffered a head injury Saturday while playing in a high school game in northern New York. He was only 14 years old. His father, Jason Chrisman, sharing this heart-wrenching message. We all prayed for a miracle to happen, for you to be saved. Sadly, the damage was just too much. This is the same kind of miracle Steve Ham prayed for in 2015 when his son Ben was sidelined after a tackle.
I said, Ben, you know who I am? And then he just, I'll never forget, it's a god-awful groan. Just and somebody recognized that he was having seizures.
Paramedics rushed the high school junior to the hospital. Little over a week later, he was gone.
We made the family decision to unplug the machine, and he didn't last 5 minutes.
On average, over the past 3 years, there have been around 8 high school football deaths per academic year, according to the National Center for Catastrophic Sport Injury Research. Already this year, there have been 6, and it's only September.
What is the actual issue here that needs to be addressed?
Our first goal, of course, is to prevent them from happening in the first place. But when they do happen, the goal is then to act and work to mitigate any severe consequences.
Experts say schools should have an emergency action plan in writing and rehearse it. Follow state guidelines to determine when a player returns to the field after a concussion. Keep a defibrillator and a certified athletic trainer nearby, and report every incident that occurs.
The Chrisman family is going through now what you went through. What is your message to those parents?
I will be praying for you. I will pray for strength. It's been 6 years, and I'm still crying.
So heartbreaking to hear from that father there. NBC News Now correspondent Priscilla Thompson joins us now from the Bronx here in New York City. Priscilla, I have to ask you, high school football is such a part of Americana. It's a part of so many cities across this country. What are researchers exactly recommending, and are high schools listening?
Yeah, so researchers tell us that those changes are being made. Things like having that emergency plan in place, keeping those defibrillators and certified athletic trainers nearby. And the federation that oversees high school football has also made changes to protect players in recent years, including eliminating the blindside block and tightening rules around blocking below the waist. And to broaden out and put this into context, researchers tell me there are around 1 million high school football players in any given year. And so these kinds of deaths are fairly rare, but certainly for the researchers and the families impacted, they're hoping they'll be non-existent one day. Tom?
Priscilla Thompson with a very powerful story tonight on Top Story. Priscilla, thank you for that. When we come back, the unique birthday wish, the 12-year-old going through what so many families are in this pandemic, the gift he's asking for to help save lives. Stay with us. Finally tonight, the 12-year-old from New Jersey inspired by his own loss to make a special birthday wish. For the last year, Gavin Roberts has had one birthday wish in mind.
He was always saying, well, it's the vaccine, we're going to get that.
So this Sunday, on his 12th birthday, a nurse granting him that wish. He was finally old enough to get his first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine.
She gave me the dose and we waited 15 minutes after to see if I had any reaction. Then she gave me my vaccine card.
What came after was a painful side effect of longing. That piece of paper, a reminder of just how cruel the virus could be. Last year, COVID-19 took his father's life, police officer Charles Rob Roberts.
I think it was April 21st, he collapsed, and then on May 11th, we let him go.
Officer Roberts was just 45 years old. His wife says he was healthy when he was taken down by COVID.
He took the virus very seriously, but because other people all didn't, and there wasn't vaccinations then, and there wasn't great testing, he never had the opportunity to get the vaccine.
Alice Roberts, an elementary school teacher, was left with 3 children to raise on her own.
Throughout this whole experience, we've felt that if we can turn a really sad, horrible moment in our lives into something that can help people, we want to do that. We see the only way out of this pandemic is to get as many people vaccinated as possible.
A birthday wish, and now the public learning this family's story, they hope will help save lives.
by seeing us. Hopefully it personalizes it for people and it's a real thing and it really happened to us. We're not paid actors. It really happened. And it can happen to anyone.
I hope that people just learn that it's very hard to go through, and I hope no one else, well, I know some people are going to experience, but I hope a lot of people don't experience this.
A 12-year-old teaching us all something very important. Thanks so much for watching Top Story. I'm Tom Llamas. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.